He said I fought for you. But was that before or after he signed the second marriage certificate? Because, according to multiple insiders, Sumit Kumar's so-called commitment to Jenny wasn't just cracking. It was never whole. There are claims now that while Jenny Slatten believed she was building a forever home in India, her husband was allegedly entering a second marriage behind her back. Not on camera. Not with love. But with intention, pressure, and a quiet goal that didn't include her. You thought you knew the timeline? You thought the wedding was the end of their war with his parents? Then, explain how the same man who wept for approval in front of millions allegedly turned around and married someone else, quietly, privately, without a single frame reaching the show's final cut. Welcome to TLC Drama Live. I'm Sabrina, and if you've ever trusted this franchise to protect the people it films, this story will change that. If you're as shocked as I am already, hit subscribe right now and let me know in the comments what moment made your jaw drop first. Because this one doesn't pull punches and it doesn't slow down. The worst part? She didn't even know. Jenny wasn't just in the dark. She was decorating it. Folding laundry in a home that didn't legally recognize her as anything more than a visitor. Telling cameras she felt finally chosen, while her name allegedly never made it onto any registry that would give her protection, dignity, or even confirmation that she wasn't alone in that marriage. Sources close to production say it was known off camera, not during filming, not during confessionals, but as gossip shared in offhand comments by people close to the family. When it finally reached the surface, it wasn't through a TLC statement or a public apology. It came as a whisper that grew teeth. What we know is still unofficial. No documents have been shown publicly, but the insiders are lining up. Multiple accounts, independently, all pointing to the same event, a second marriage, arranged or at least heavily encouraged by Sumit's family, held with minimal ceremony, limited guests, and strict no-photo rules. That's what they're saying. That it was done not for love, not for drama, but for duty. Allegedly. And if that's true, then Jenny's story shifts from struggle to something far worse. Not a woman misunderstood, a woman misled. And that's where the show crosses from reality to complicity. Because if Jenny was living in India thinking she was a wife while her actual legal standing was uncertain, then she wasn't just emotionally vulnerable. She was structurally dependent. No rights, no protection, no fallback. And if that second marriage was designed to satisfy the cultural demands of Sumit's parents while Jenny was kept on screen for sentiment, that's not just deception. It's humiliation, disguised as affection. She was shown as a partner while possibly being erased as one in real life. And if even part of that is true, then this story is bigger than infidelity. It's about power, control, and who gets to tell the truth first. Still, some viewers defend Sumit, saying maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was a family formality with no legal weight. But if that's true, why wasn't Jenny told? Why wasn't it acknowledged? And why, if it didn't matter, was it allegedly done in secret with explicit instructions not to inform production or press? This isn't a case of miscommunication. It's looking more and more like a parallel life, one for the cameras, one for the family. And Jenny, the woman who uprooted her life and endured years of being called a homewrecker, a liar, even a predator, might have been nothing more than a placeholder while her in-laws orchestrated a backup plan they always intended to enforce. The silence from Sumit is already loud. But the silence from Jenny? That's deafening, because you don't go quiet unless the truth is heavier than what you were allowed to believe. And right now, every fan who stood by this couple, who believed the chaos was leading to clarity, is starting to ask the same question. If this marriage wasn't the real one, was Jenny ever even in it? They didn't scream. They didn't threaten. They didn't have to. Sumit's parents didn't need another explosive confrontation on camera because they already knew how to win this war quietly. Pressure doesn't always come with yelling. Sometimes it's served with tea. Sometimes it walks into your house, looks you in the eye, and tells you with a smile that your marriage means nothing. Not because you're unloved, but because you're not enough. That's how tradition talks. That's how guilt builds. It doesn't tear you down in a day. It erases you over years. And Jenny, despite everything she sacrificed, was never allowed to become permanent. To the audience, it looked like victory. Sumit stood his ground. The wedding happened. His mother sobbed in disapproval, but the ceremony went on. What fans didn't see was what allegedly followed. The private conversations, the cold shoulders, the endless visits where Jenny's name was left out, where questions about grandchildren were pushed harder than questions about happiness. Every family meal became a negotiation. Every text from a cousin turned into a reminder. They didn't have to say it out loud. Jenny was never the long-term solution. She was the detour they were forced to tolerate. And Sumit, torn between public love and private loyalty, allegedly bent. Because when tradition tells you to fulfill your duty, and your community tells you you've disappointed them, and your own mother tells you she's ashamed, eventually, you don't resist. You conform. And according to insiders, that's exactly how the second marriage began. Quietly. As a solution, framed as the right thing to do. Not to replace Jenny, but to restore order. That's the narrative. That Jenny wasn't pushed out with violence, but slowly phased out with silence. Viewers celebrated a love story, while a second storyline was allegedly being written behind closed doors, with new characters, new expectations, and no room for the woman we all thought had finally won. And if you think Sumit was stuck, think again. Allegedly, he agreed. Not under duress, not as a victim, but as someone who chose to stop resisting. Someone who was told he could have both. That Jenny didn't need to know, that the show didn't need to know, and that as long as everything looked okay on the outside, the rest could be handled like business. One insider described the decision as strategic compliance, a move made to quiet the backlash at home while still playing the part abroad. What Jenny didn't realize was that her position in the family wasn't being strengthened. It was being replaced, not loudly, but with methodical precision. Her importance became symbolic, her presence tolerated, her love downgraded, and it showed. Small things, less affection, more deflection, questions unanswered, plans delayed, the kind of emotional distancing that doesn't scream betrayal, but hums it. She noticed. Maybe not right away. But you can't share a bed with someone who's living another life and not feel the air shift. You can't keep pretending forever. And at some point, Jenny started to pull away. Not because she knew everything, but because something had changed. The warmth wasn't the same. The future stopped being discussed. The pressure to stay happy grew louder than the happiness itself. You don't need proof to feel when you're being erased. You just need time. And Jenny had given enough. Enough years. Enough patience. Enough hope. The problem was, she still thought she was fighting for her marriage. She didn't realize the fight had already been settled without her in the room. They were filming a love story, but something didn't fit. The energy shifted off camera first. Between scenes, during travel setups, when crew casually asked about plans and got vague replies. Sumit dodged direct answers. Jenny, often open and expressive, had started pausing before she spoke. It wasn't tension you could script, it was tension you felt. And according to insiders, some production members felt it early. There were reports that small things stood out. Sumit missing scheduled shoots without clear explanations. His phone always on silent. New family members quietly coming and going, never introduced to the show. Rumors circled. The kind that get brushed off until someone finally says, "Are we being lied to?" But this wasn't just a personal secret. It was a possible narrative collapse. Because if Sumit had allegedly entered a second marriage off-screen, everything TLC was showing, every episode, every fight, every resolution, wasn't just misleading. It was wrong. Sources say the whispers made it up the ladder. Field producers raised questions. Some were told to stay focused. Others were warned not to pursue rumors without documentation. That's where the freeze begins. Because in reality TV, emotion is encouraged, but exposure is regulated. There's a line you're not supposed to cross unless legal clears it first. And when a cast member's alleged betrayal involves marriage, immigration, and possible visa manipulation, the risk becomes real. Not just emotionally, legally. Some insiders claim TLC didn't know until post-production. Others say they knew much earlier, but were paralyzed by contracts. The truth is still buried under layers of denial and silence. What's clear is that at some point, someone within production allegedly learned that a second marriage had occurred or was being planned and didn't bring it forward. Not to the audience. Not to Jenny. Maybe not even to network execs right away. If that happened, the show stopped being a story and started being a shield protecting the lie instead of exposing it. And that's when entertainment turns into participation. Because what are you watching if the central conflict isn't real? What are you reacting to if the ending has already been decided, just not disclosed? Jenny wasn't the only one kept in the dark. Millions of viewers believed in her struggle, believed in Sumit's sincerity, cried when his parents refused to attend the wedding, cheered when he finally stood up for love. But if the cameras kept rolling while the truth was quietly unfolding elsewhere, the audience wasn't witnessing resolution. They were watching a cover-up. And let's be honest, TLC isn't new to this. The network has walked the tightrope between sensationalism and silence before. Fans have long accused the franchise of hiding cast controversies until they explode online. But this one feels different. This one involves a woman's legal status, her dignity, her mental health. If Jenny was filmed building a life that was already being replaced, then someone behind the scenes had the chance to step in, and didn't. Maybe it started with doubt. Maybe someone on the crew asked, offhand, "Is this real?" Maybe another noticed the paperwork wasn't adding up. Maybe someone heard the wrong name mentioned in the wrong context. Whatever it was, insiders say a red flag was raised. And the response wasn't urgency. It was avoidance. The story had momentum. The season needed resolution. And Jenny's hope was more compelling than her reality. So they filmed around it. They stayed silent. And allegedly, when the truth finally started leaking, when private sources confirmed the second marriage, it was too late to edit it in. Too late to explain. Too late to warn the person whose life was now entangled in a plot she hadn't agreed to. She left everything behind to be with him, country, comfort, even her grandchildren. But did Sumit ever give her the one thing that could have made her life in India real? Not a promise, not a ceremony. Legal protection. Because love without paperwork is just vulnerability in disguise. And now, with the second marriage allegations circling like smoke around a locked room, the question hits harder than ever. Was Jenny ever actually safe in that marriage? Or was she just living in the shadows of someone else's decision? Living in India as a dependent foreign spouse means your rights don't belong to you. They belong to your partner. You don't get permanent residency. You don't get your own legal identity. Everything is tied to the status of your marriage. And if that marriage isn't officially registered, if it's symbolic, spiritual, or unrecognized by the government, you're not a wife. You're a guest. One argument, one change of heart, one silent betrayal, and your whole life can be taken with the signature. Jenny believed she was married. She believed she was settled. But insiders now suggest that belief might have been the only thing she had. Multiple sources claim there were gaps in the paperwork, delays in processing, questions about why she never posted photos of a marriage certificate, why her visa status never changed, why she still referred to herself in interviews as trying to get things finalized. Some fans brushed it off. But others, especially those familiar with international marriage law, began to question, was Jenny ever more than a temporary resident in a relationship that now looks dangerously transactional? You can survive homesickness. You can survive disapproval. But you can't survive being undocumented in a foreign country while the person you depend on builds a secret life behind your back. That's where the emotional erosion starts. Not with a fight. With fear. The kind of fear that creeps in when simple questions start getting complex answers. When you ask about the next visa renewal and get a shrug. When you wonder why the paperwork hasn't moved forward and are told it's complicated. When you realize the man who once promised to fight for you is now checking his phone more than he checks in with you. Allegedly, Jenny started asking questions, not accusations, just careful, hopeful questions about timelines, about interviews, about next steps. Insiders say the responses were inconsistent, sometimes defensive, sometimes avoidant, and then came the silence. No confirmation, no refusal, just absence. Like he was hoping she'd stop asking if he didn't answer. And maybe, for a while, she did. Because love has a way of making you wait longer than you should. Of telling yourself, it's just a delay. Just paperwork. Just stress. But when fear replaces clarity, you start sleeping with one eye open. You start wondering what else you weren't told. And once doubt moves in, it doesn't leave quietly. It grows. Especially when the world outside starts whispering louder than the man beside you. He held her hand on camera, kissed her forehead, told her the wait was worth it. And then he'd disappear. Not physically, emotionally. Days without real conversation. Smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. Promises without follow-through. Jenny called it stress. She told herself he was tired, overwhelmed, stuck between two worlds. What she didn't see, what none of us did, was the pattern. The careful, quiet pattern of emotional withdrawal dressed up as love. Sumit knew how to perform devotion. He'd done it for years. Every time Jenny doubted his loyalty, he gave her a gesture. Not substance. A date night. A compliment. A hug in front of the cameras. Then, the distance would return. His family had rejected her. His culture questioned her. The world online insulted her. So, when he offered moments of sweetness, Jenny clung to them, not because they were enough, but because they were all she had. And that's how this kind of manipulation works. You're not pushed away with cruelty. You're pulled close with just enough care to keep you from leaving. While behind your back, the person you love might be preparing an entirely different future that doesn't include you. That's what insiders now allege. That while Jenny was being filmed planning holidays, choosing outfits, and defending her marriage online, Sumit was emotionally detaching. That he was showing up for taping and checking out in real life. The timeline feels cruel. Sources say the shift happened slowly. Not overnight. Not dramatic. A missed message here. A canceled dinner there. Plans postponed for vague reasons. And all of it blamed on outside stress, visa delays, family pressure, health concerns. Jenny, ever loyal, gave him space. She didn't want to nag. She didn't want to lose the version of him she fought so hard to keep. But the version she loved had already left the room. Love stops being love when it's used to distract you from the truth. And that's exactly how this silence became so powerful. It kept Jenny calm, while everything around her was changing without her consent. And the silence wasn't just quiet, it was strategic. Allegedly, even when Jenny asked questions, she didn't get answers. She got detours, excuses, charm. He told her not to worry, that everything was fine, that he was tired, not distant, that he needed time, not space. But time kept passing, and Jenny, in her gut, knew something was off. Insiders claim she finally confronted him, calmly, not with accusations, but with concern. She wanted reassurance. She wanted truth. What she got was confusion, wordplay, shifting blame. He allegedly said she was being insecure, that she was reading too much into things. That love meant trusting him, even when it was hard. And that's when it shifted again, from sadness to something darker. Because when someone uses your loyalty against you, it doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your reality. Jenny started second-guessing herself, wondering if she really was being paranoid, whether the cracks she saw were real or imagined. And Sumit, allegedly, kept feeding that doubt, not to hurt her, but to keep the game going. Because as long as she questioned herself, she wouldn't question him. She stopped defending him. Not out loud, not at first, but inside. In the space where denial used to live, doubt took over. Jenny didn't explode. She didn't pack bags in the middle of the night or slam doors for the cameras. That's not how real heartbreak works. It unfolds in silence. It creeps in when you're folding laundry alone and realize you don't know what your husband does when he's gone. It sinks in when you cook for two but eat alone. Jenny stopped arguing, not because the conflict ended, but because her hope did. She wasn't herself anymore. Her friends noticed it first, the way she spoke slower, the way she stopped making plans, the way her voice cracked when she tried to explain things she used to believe. They said she cried more, not in front of people, but at night, in private. When the day was over and she was still waiting for something to feel real again. She used to fight for the relationship. Now she was holding on for clarity. The change wasn't sudden. It was cellular, a loss of identity. She came to India thinking she was beginning a new chapter. What she got was a loop. A constant replay of broken promises, missteps, and emotional fog. She still lived in the same house, wore the same ring, stood in the same spot where she once said I do. But she didn't feel married. She felt stranded. There's a special kind of grief that comes from realizing you were the only one trying to make something work, and Jenny was finally starting to understand that her love had been doing all the heavy lifting. She started pulling back. Not to punish, to protect. She didn't initiate conversations anymore. She stopped asking about the future. When people called from home, she spoke about weather, not marriage. Because every time she talked about Sumit, the lie got heavier. And no matter how much she tried to find one last reason to stay, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had been chosen for a purpose. And that purpose had expired. Jenny wasn't jealous of another woman. That wasn't the pain. The pain was deeper. It was the realization that she had been part of a story that may have never been about her. That her presence, her sacrifices, her love had been symbolic, convenient, marketable. And now that convenience had run its course, she started thinking about going back. Not as an escape, but as a necessity. America felt like a failure when she left. Now it felt like the only place she might still recognize herself. But even that decision wasn't easy. Because leaving wouldn't just mean the end of a relationship. It would mean the collapse of an identity. Jenny wasn't just Sumit's partner. She was the woman who defied everything to be with him. And if that story was over, what was left? That's when it hit her. Not through a fight, not through a confession. Just a quiet, internal moment. The kind that stops time. She looked at him across the room, distracted, distant, and something inside her finally clicked. He was never going to choose her the way she chose him. And maybe He never had. It started with a leak. One small post on a fan page. No confirmation, no details, just a sentence that said Sumit might have married someone else. Within hours, that rumor turned into wildfire. Facebook groups blew up. Reddit threads hit hundreds of comments within minutes. TikTok creators started pulling old clips and slowing them down frame by frame, looking for cracks they'd missed. That moment when Sumit avoided eye contact during a proposal? Suspicious now. The way he froze when Jenny talked about starting a business together? Suddenly relevant. What was once seen as awkward became evidence. What was once romantic now felt rehearsed. The tone shifted quickly. First came disbelief. Fans couldn't imagine Jenny being lied to that deeply. Then came rage. Not at her, but for her. Viewers who once criticized her for being desperate now called her used. The shift was sharp. Because if the rumors were true, Jenny wasn't naive. She was targeted. And that accusation hit harder than any storyline the show had ever aired. Creators stitched interviews, hunted for background audio, even zoomed into frames where Sumit's phone lit up mid-scene. Nothing was safe. Every tell-all, every confession, every silent moment between takes was pulled apart. Some claimed you could see Jenny's confusion building. Others said it was always clear Sumit was playing a part. The debate wasn't whether it happened anymore. It was how long it had been happening. Audiences turned from entertained to enraged, and once trust breaks on reality TV, it doesn't come back. It gets replaced with obsession. Hashtags exploded, hashtag justice for Jenny, hashtag TLC exposed, hashtag Sumit's secret. Memes turned tragic. Fan edits that once celebrated their unconventional love were now paired with betrayal anthems. And the more viewers shared, the more unified the backlash became. People didn't just want answers, they wanted accountability. They tagged TLC in every post, demanded statements, asked why the network hadn't addressed the growing rumors. The silence felt complicit, because at this point, staying quiet didn't look cautious. It looked guilty. Some viewers promised to boycott the franchise. Others said they felt duped after investing years into a couple that now seemed hollow from the start. But the loudest cries weren't aimed at Sumit or the network. They were for Jenny. Fans begged her to say something. Anything. Not for drama, but for closure. To confirm that she was okay. To tell her side. To reclaim the narrative before it was taken from her completely. But she didn't. She didn't post. She didn't go live. No statements. No cryptic captions. Not even a shared quote. Nothing. Jenny went silent. And somehow, that silence hurt more than the rumors. Because people realized this wasn't a reality show twist. This was a real woman, possibly blindsided, possibly alone, possibly dismantling her entire life in private, while the internet turned her heartbreak into content. The louder the fans got, the quieter she became. And in that silence, the tension only grew. Because the one voice they needed, the only one who could tell the truth, was still missing. And that made it real in a way no headline ever could. There wasn't a final fight. No breaking glass. No screaming in the kitchen. No camera crew standing by as someone stormed off. The collapse didn't come with fire. It came with cold. Jenny stopped waiting for an apology that wouldn't come. She stopped defending a love that had become silent. And she started packing, not dramatically, not to prove a point, but because staying had begun to feel like self-betrayal. She didn't tell anyone. Not at first. There was no announcement, no I'm done. The decision unfolded the same way the deception had. Quietly, methodically, painfully. A small pile of items she knew she'd take back to America. A drawer emptied. Clothes folded, not thrown. It wasn't revenge. It was relief. A kind of survival instinct that kicks in when you realize you've built a life on soft promises and now there's nothing solid left beneath your feet. TLC didn't film it. Her retreat wasn't part of the show. There was no confessional with tears and mascara, no producer sitting off camera asking how she felt. Jenny didn't give the network a dramatic ending because drama was never the point. She wanted peace, and when it became clear she couldn't have it in India, not in that house, not with that man, she stopped asking for resolution and started preparing for release. Some stories don't end with closure. They just run out of reasons to keep going. And that's where Jenny found herself, staring at a future that had already let her go without telling her. Insiders claim she started liquidating quietly, selling furniture, giving away clothes, leaving behind the things she once thought she'd grow old with. The little trinkets of a shared life now felt heavy, not sentimental. She didn't cry in front of people. But those close to her say there was a heaviness in her voice that hadn't been there before. The kind of grief that doesn't yell. It sits on your chest when you try to breathe. Sumit didn't stop her. At least, not in the way she needed. No dramatic plea. No last-minute confession. If anything, the alleged distance became more obvious. As if the story had reached its expiration date, and everyone involved was too tired to pretend it hadn't. He still played the part when necessary, still acted normal enough. But when love dies, it leaves behind a silence that even politeness can't cover. This wasn't about hate. Jenny didn't hate Sumit. That's what made it harder. Because if he had been cruel, if he had screamed, or cheated publicly, or humiliated her, walking away would have been easier. But instead, he disappeared emotionally while staying physically present. That's the kind of erasure that breaks you slowly, quietly, permanently. And so, she made the kind of decision that no one prepares you for. Not in marriage, not in immigration, not in life. She booked a one-way ticket, allegedly. The kind you don't buy unless you're done explaining, done hoping, done waiting. Sources say she didn't tell him at first. She didn't need permission. She didn't need drama. She just needed out. Because sometimes the most powerful act of survival is choosing to leave before you're pushed. People wanted to believe it. They needed to. That love could win. That age didn't matter. That two people from opposite sides of the world could fight through judgment and come out stronger. But now, after everything, those same people are asking a much darker question. Was any of it real, or was Jenny never the ending, only the storyline? It's the kind of question that doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from betrayal. Because fans didn't just watch Jenny and Sumit, they defended them. They argued in comment sections. They clapped during tell-alls. They forgave every red flag because they believed this relationship had something most reality TV couples didn't. Heart. But maybe that heart was performance. Maybe it was packaging. Maybe Jenny was never meant to be a wife. Only a bridge to something safer, more acceptable, more familiar. Something Sumit's family could tolerate. Something Sumit could grow into once the cameras moved on. He said the right things. He cried at the right moments. He begged his parents for approval. But now, looking back, those tears feel rehearsed. Those pleas sound rehearsed. Those delays? Intentional. Because when someone wants you in their future, they don't need a script to say it. They make room. And that's the part Jenny finally saw. Not in one dramatic moment, but in all the small ones. The way he always postponed paperwork. The way he always blamed external pressure. The way her needs became inconveniences, not priorities. She didn't lose a man. She lost a belief that their story was ever truly mutual. And that's the kind of grief you don't get over with time. Only with truth. But the truth never came. Jenny left, or is leaving, without it. No clarity. No apology. No final moment where he admits the plan. Insiders say Sumit has gone quiet. That even as rumors exploded and fans demanded answers, he's given none. No social media post. No public denial. Nothing. Just silence. And silence isn't neutral. Not when someone you claim to love walks away publicly humiliated and you say nothing. Silence becomes the answer. The indictment. The final confirmation that maybe, just maybe, this was always a story told in two directions. Jenny's was about love. His might have been about leverage. Because it's not just Jenny who feels used. It's the audience too. They rooted for him, forgave him, believed him. And now they're left staring at a blank screen wondering how many of those moments were real and how many were curated for maximum sympathy. Every hug, every wedding vow, every tearful scene outside his parents' house. If the foundation was a lie, the entire story crumbles. This is the fallout zone. Not fiery, not dramatic, just empty. The messages have stopped. The interviews have dried up. The man who once fought to be with Jenny now disappears when her name trends. And the silence doesn't feel like privacy. It feels like retreat. Like the kind of quiet you keep when the truth isn't on your side. She wasn't destroyed. She was exhausted. And there's a difference. Jenny didn't collapse under the weight of betrayal. She walked away carrying it. Quietly. Without spectacle. Because after giving years to a man who may have never planned to stay, she still chose to leave with dignity. Not as a victim, not as a failure, but as a woman who gave everything and finally realized that love can't be built on hope alone. This was never about being naive. It was about being all in. Jenny didn't lose because she trusted the wrong person. She survived because she trusted herself enough to stop waiting for answers that would never come. That takes strength most people don't have. That takes clarity in the middle of chaos. And that's the part her critics never saw. The woman who packed her things not out of bitterness, but because she couldn't afford to waste another day on someone who wouldn't speak up even when her life was burning. It's easy to judge someone who stays too long. Harder to understand why they stayed. Jenny wasn't clinging to a fantasy. She was trying to protect the version of her life she had worked so hard to build. The one where she was a wife, not a placeholder. A partner, not a cover story. And even as the foundation cracked and everything she believed in started falling apart, she didn't lash out. She stepped back. That's not weakness. That's restraint. That's someone who loved too hard in a system that kept moving the goalposts and still refused to let that love turn into hate. Behind the scenes, production sources now claim that TLC is quietly reevaluating Sumit's future. Nothing confirmed, no official statements, but the murmurs are growing. The franchise has been hit hard before, but this storyline crossed a line with fans. They're not just disappointed, they're angry. And when audience trust drops, networks start protecting themselves. Sumit's silence is already damaging. If the allegations are true, and if Jenny confirms any part of it, the blowback could be severe. Some insiders even say producers are preparing alternate casts for future spin-offs, just in case. But while all of that plays out in conference rooms and email chains, the real story is happening off-camera. Jenny's gone quiet. No new videos, no interviews, no sponsored posts. She hasn't commented on the rumors. She hasn't defended herself. And maybe she never will. Maybe this ends with her rebuilding in private, quietly finding a new version of herself that doesn't include public closure. Or maybe she speaks, and everything changes again. What happens if Jenny returns to the US and tells the truth? Unfiltered, in her own words. What if she starts over, not with tears, but with clarity? Would fans rally behind her? Would TLC distance itself from the lie? Or worse, what if she never speaks again? What if the woman who gave everything to be seen chooses to stay hidden for good? Because silence is safer than being misrepresented one more time. The story isn't finished. The cameras are off. But the questions haven't stopped. And until Jenny breaks the silence, or the silence breaks her, this fallout will keep growing louder.